Hi, good to see you again. And today we're going to talk about this topic called how to 10x your company and to scale your business. So, this is actually a very, very interesting topic that a lot of companies are interested to find out. And today we're going to just go through some concepts on this and also to find out what are some steps you can take to really embark on how to 10x your business. But first, before we start, let's just go through where did this idea come from. So I would like to introduce you once again to this book called Scaling Up. And as you know, Scaling Up is written by Vern Harnish, a very famous business author and leader, and also a teacher who has taught many, many businesses across the world. Thousands of companies have applied his concepts, and this concept, how to 10x your business, is really actually from this book. And he has helped a lot of companies to grow, and I'll be very excited to share with you some of the work that I've done with some of my clients in finding out what's the 10x. So again, brief introduction of myself. My name is Jeremy, and I'm a scaling up coach. I work with Vern across this region in Asia, and I help Asia Pacific CEOs to implement the scaling up methodology in their companies to help them to scale their business to achieve the kind of breakthrough results that they want. So today, let's talk about this question of the 10x. But first of all, before I go into the topic, I just want to share you that this is a part of a series that I work with companies across a 18-month program. So I work with companies across 18 months, helping them to implement this system in a very systematic way. And one of the very important topics towards the later part of this coaching process, this 18-month process, is what we call the niche domination strategies. So that is the part where we actually talk about how companies can win and beat their competitors and also hold the ground so that they can be sustainable in their growth. And this topic we're going to talk about today, about a 10x, is actually part of this niche domination series that I do. Okay, but this is a long series, and today I just want to jump into this 10x question because this is something that has intrigued a lot of companies. And I want to just share with you what are some of the key things we have learned and also some tips for you to immediately ask yourself this question: can you also 10x your business? Okay, so the things we talk about in niche domination is 10x, 3 to 5 differentiating activities, breaking industry bad habits, and core competencies that gives you an edge. All these four things together will enable you to dominate a niche in your market. But today, let's jump into this question of how do you 10x your business. So, I want to start off with this question, and I want you to answer this question very honestly. And the question is: do you really think it's possible to 10x your business? Now, why do I ask this question? Actually, a lot of people, they talk about we want to grow our business, we want to 10x our business, but fundamentally there are a lot of people who do not believe in this. And I think that is the first question we really want to deal with, and that is, how do you 10x your business? Is it even possible? Because you see, before we even go into how to 10x your business, first of all, in our minds, we must know that this is possible, or we must at least consider the possibility that yes, this can be done, right? Because I know for a fact that there are some people who don't even teach this topic, because they talk to me and they say, why bother to teach our clients this methodology of how to 10x your business, because it's almost impossible to find. Now, I actually disagree with that, because in our company, what we have done is apply these concepts on a particular area, what we call a constraint, and we actually 10x that part, right? In our company's case, it was the cash flow. We changed our business model because once we understood this 10x concept, we were able to increase our cash flow, the cash in bank, almost 10 times compared to what we used to have. So I think and I believe it is really possible to 10x your business. It is really a question of, first, do you believe that it's possible? Because only when you believe it's possible, then we can start to find the way to 10x. So, before we go further, ask yourself this question: do you really believe it's possible for your business to grow 10 times? So, what are some reasons that some companies don't take this question seriously? Okay, I find that the three top problems or three top killers to this dream of growing a business 10 times in a particular area is because some companies are just too focused on the short term. They are always chasing after what we call short-term targets, like what is the 3-month revenue target, what's the 1-year revenue target, and there's nothing wrong with that because we need to actually make sure those numbers come in. But the problem is that when we put 100% into the short-term focus, we forget to look at the long term. So there are many reasons for this. Like one of my clients told me they can't think beyond 1 year is simply because they're struggling. They find that they're struggling to even maintain, right? So to focus on the short term is one reason why companies don't take this 10x question seriously. The second one is really a lack of a long term strategy, meaning they are not used to thinking like that. They are thinking that, okay, as long as I can meet the target, life goes on. But what happens next year? What happens in 3 years? What happens in 5 years' time? Because the market is not going to be stagnant, right? It's actually moving. So if you don't actually think of a strategy to do something differently from what you are doing today, then even if you are doing well today, it will not be the case tomorrow. And the last one is really about comfort zone. So a lot of companies that I work with actually find that, by the time they need to apply scaling up, it is usually because they're in some kind of a pain. And they want me to come in to help them to solve this pain. Now, again, nothing wrong with that. But again, what we are thinking about here today is a different kind of mindset. It's a mindset that challenges us to say, yes, our business model is working now and our business is growing now, but we need to challenge the status quo. We need to go and do something differently, and not just differently, but something that will challenge us to be much, much better than what we are today. So these are the three things that I find hinders companies from taking this 10x seriously. Okay, now why should you therefore take this 10x question seriously? It is really because this 10x question opens doors to new opportunities. So one of my clients, this company that I've been talking to, they're actually a medical company, and they actually told me that the potential investors actually laid a challenge for them and said that currently you're too small, but you got a great business. If you can grow your business 10 times, you can increase your revenue 10 times. We are going to invest in you and we're going to take your product around the world. So think about that. When you have a 10x kind of a growth or 10x area of growth, then it opens opportunities for you to talk at a different level. And when you talk at a different level, then you're playing a totally different game. The second reason why I think every business owner should really ask himself this 10x question is not so much focusing on the end result. Because some people say, oh, this is like the holy grail. How do you find it? But my challenge to you is this, that even if you don't find a 10x answer, the process alone will change you. Maybe you don't hit 10x, but what about 5x? What about 7x? That's actually very, very good already, right? So what we really want again is to take that kind of a mindset to say, how do we break through and how do we just be a totally different kind of a player compared to our competitors? So that alone, that process alone will change your business. And I think that in itself is worth it. And the last question I think is very, very important is if you don't find your 10x answer, your competitor will. Just because we sit on our laurels or just because we find it hard does not mean that somebody else will not do it, right? So I think this is really a very important question, and I want to put forth to you today that yes, it's possible because we have done it, and that is really that whole mindset and skill sets of a business to find your 10x. So the point I want to keep to bring up and remind us is that the point is that competition will only catch up. How do we keep our lead? How do we keep becoming better? You see, because eventually everything in this market or industry will eventually become copied, right? And when something becomes copied, then you start to compete on price. Now, we don't want to end up in that kind of situation. So your 10x strategy is really about your secret weapon. Do you have a secret weapon that will enable to eliminate or make the competition irrelevant? Now, this sounds ambitious. And when I was talking to one business owner that I'm working with, my company is working with currently, and when I shared with him about this 10x strategy as part of the niche domination strategy, he said, wow, domination is a strong word. dominate an industry or a constraint is a strong word. It's a big word. And I shared with him and said that, look, if we are really going all out to win, then we should play big. We should think big. Otherwise, what different are we from other people, right? So this is really a question of, do you have a secret weapon that will make other people irrelevant? So let's jump in to talk about this. So we all know John D. Rockefeller is a very successful businessman, and people say that until today he remains the richest man ever lived, right? So in that period of time, there were many rich people, millionaires, billionaires, successful business people like John Rockefeller in the US, but he's one level above everybody else. So what did he do differently? And this is where Vern Harnish, the author of Scaling Up, studied John Rockefeller and distilled his thinking and his strategies. And that's why he calls Scaling Up the Rockefeller habits, because we want to learn from Rockefeller, what did he do so differently. And I really like this saying called that John Rockefeller made, and that is, competition is a sin. Why compete? The goal should be to make our competitors irrelevant. Let them be the ones to compete. So, a story about John Rockefeller went like this. How did he really build his wealth? Is that during that period of time, there was the oil boom in the United States. So, everybody was looking to find the next oil field and mine it. So, when you have got supply going up, what happens to price? Price starts coming down. So John, being a very astute businessman, he took a step back and said, what is the opportunity? Where is the constraint? Now, everybody is pumping oil, but where is that one thing that everybody will converge? And he realized that there is a shortage of oil barrels because there was only one company that made the steel rims that held these barrels together. So what did he do? Instead of competing with everybody in pumping oil, he looked at the constraint and he bought that plant. And now he became the one who dominated the constraint. So how did he 10x his business? By dominating a constraint and not getting into the competition. So this is the kind of mindset we're talking about when we talk about 10x strategy. What can we do that will increase our revenue, our sales, or bring down our costs, our time spent, or whatever it is that you want to work on? How do you increase or reduce that by 10 times? And that's really by looking at the constraints and asking yourself, how do I dominate a constraint, or how do I break a constraint in the industry? So let's talk about another very interesting story that Vern always share about in his books, and it is really the liquid soap industry, right? So we know that the liquid soap now today it's very popular, but in the 1980s when it was first released into the market, the owner of this business realized one big problem, and that is this product is not difficult to copy, right? It's very easy for people to make the same product. There's no barrier of entry. And he knows that being a small company, he's always in danger because once this catches on, the big boys like Palmolive, Johnson and Johnson, and different big players will come in and they will just duplicate this product and just wipe him out, right? By sheer economies of scale. So he asked himself this question: how do I can't fight them in terms of the quantity. I can't go into a price war with them. So how do I keep myself relevant? How do I survive? So he realized that there is actually a very critical part of the soft soap, and that is the pump. And this pump at that point in time was only manufactured by one factory in the United States. So what did he do? He went and he ordered and he made them commit that for the next few years, every single pump they can produce, he has already bought them. And true enough, when soft soap became popular, the big boys came in and started to mass produce soft soap, liquid soap. And then they realized that they can't sell it because they don't have that pump. And now he was able to sell them the pump or work with them for a lot of money before selling his business to one of these FMCG giants who bought him for a lot of money. So this is actually what the mindset of 10xing your business is to find that constraint, and then in this particular case he dominated that constraint so that he could increase vastly the value of what he sells and what he does. Let me share with you a second story that I find really inspiring, and that is really about paper. Right, paper is such a normal, down to earth product. Nothing sexy about the paper industry, right? Everyday paper is being used. It's such a commodity. But where do you think is the constraint in the paper industry? Is actually in the raw materials, right? It takes tons of wood to make 1 ton of a pulp of paper pulp. It takes thousands of gallons of water to make 1 ton of paper. So all these materials cost a lot of money as well as an environmental cost. So there's this company in Taiwan, they asked themselves, where is the constraint? And if the constraint is in the raw material, then how do we break that constraint? So what they did was to patent a new method of making paper, and that's using marble chips. Because Taiwan is a country that produces marble. So they go to the quarries and say, give us all your chips, which is actually rubbish to them, and they crush them into powder with a patented method and mixing them with some kind of a formula, and what comes out is actually paper, using almost no amount of water, using no trees at all. And with that, they were not only able to break the constraint, but they were also able to create a type of paper that's much better than tree pulp, because now marble paper is actually waterproof and it can be used for many other types of functions that normal paper could not. So this is another example of a company who identified the constraint, and then they asked themselves this question: how do I break that constraint by reducing that particular cost to almost nothing? Now we all know, because we're in business, when you reduce your cost to nothing, it means that your profits goes up, right? So this is what we mean by really 10xing your business, but it starts with this concept of finding the constraint. So the key question that we can derive from all these three examples, John Rockefeller, liquid soap, and marble paper, is really this question of how do I break that constraint? How do I reduce the constraint that gets from here to there, right? Either I own that constraint and become a constraint on other people and thereby create tremendous value on what I have, or I break that constraint and reduce it to nothing. Right? So in that particular, just to recap, in those two examples, in the paper industry, what they have done is they have chosen to break the constraint. In the soft soap industry example, what they have done is to dominate the constraint. Now, can you think about some constraints in your business that you can either dominate or break? Right now, this is an extremely difficult question that may take time, but when you find it, then you need to systematically work on it. Okay, and later I'll share with you our own example. So how do you find this constraint? First of all, one of the easiest ways to find this constraint in industry is to ask, what is the problem in your industry that everybody faces? Right? You see, this is actually a very interesting question because it reveals your kind of a mindset as a businessman. Once I heard a politician give advice to the business community, and what I consider that that's the worst business advice I've ever heard, because that advice would destroy a business. His advice is this: if your company faces the same problems as everybody else in the industry, then it's not a problem. In other words, what's a problem for everybody is not a problem anymore. That's the worst advice I could ever think of, because if that is a problem for everybody, then that is actually your biggest opportunity, because the one who solves it wins and dominates the industry. So ask yourself currently, what is the problem in your industry that everyone faces? The second question that you can always ask yourself is, when you attend trade shows or conferences, what is a recurring topic? What do people keep talking about? What do people keep struggling with? Right? Over time, if you can pick up a trend, then you know that could be a very good indication of where can you find that constraint and your opportunity to either dominate the constraint or to break that constraint. The third question is actually very direct, and that is, what is the biggest cost to you or to everybody in the industry? Because if you can identify the biggest cost, then the question becomes easy. Can you reduce that cost by 10 times? So in the case of the industry, where they were making paper, right? The biggest cost is tree pulp and water. So how do I reduce that to nothing? So the third question is really asking, what is the biggest cost to me? It could be money, it could be time, it could be productivity, it could be raw materials, anything. Okay, but what is the biggest cost? The fourth question is interesting because it actually talks about, what do I hate about my industry? What is actually a frustration to you is likely to be a frustration to your competitors as well. So the sooner you discover and face up to that, the sooner you can actually say, how do I work on this? You see, the whole idea is that people tend to avoid what they hate and focus on what they like. But some of these things, if we look at it carefully, some of the things that we hate the most, they are actually our biggest opportunity. We just need to know how. We need to change the way we think. And the last point, what does my customer actually hate most about our industry? Now we flip the question around. It's no longer about us, but from our customer's point of view, when they deal with our industry, where is that biggest constraint for him? What's that biggest pain point, and can I totally eliminate that, or at least bring it down by 10 times? So this is an extract from one of the exercises I work with my clients. This is a part of the tools that I use. Basically, what we have is to say, we look at what is the customer's perception of value. Then there's 4 dimensions of what constitutes value for our customer. The first one would be cost, right? If we can significantly reduce the cost for our customer, then that is actually a great value for them. Or, we can bring down the price a little bit, but our margins will go up. The second is time. From the customer's point of view, time is money, right? So how can we reduce time for our customer? How do we make things faster for them? Third is actually the experience. So now a lot of people are talking about customer experience being a driver of value, right? So how can we actually significantly improve the customer experience by 10 times? Or what are those things that hinder customer satisfaction and we reduce them by 10 times? And what about this one? And that is the quality of the actual product. How do we actually increase the quality by 10 times of what we actually do in terms of the product or the service? So these are 4 areas you can immediately start working on, and you can start listing them out, that from the customer's perception of value, which is the one that I can actually work on. So when you have identified an area, then the next question would be, how do I control or break this constraint? So you run through these 5 questions. First is, what can we eliminate? What can we get rid of? Right? The second one would be, what can we reduce? If we cannot eliminate something, can we reduce it? Or the next is, what can we increase? What can we do more, or what we can add more of? So that will increase 10 times the value. Next could be, what can we create? What must we add? So in the particular case of the soft soap industry, they actually ask this question of, what can we create? What new opportunities do we need to create? And that is to buy something, to add something to their business model, and that is to add the pumps, right? No longer just focusing on just producing soap, but also changing their business model to say, how do I own the pump factory, right? So what must we add doesn't just mean product features, but you got to look at it from a slightly wider perspective. And lastly will be, what can we combine? What are some things that if we put together, it gives a totally different value proposition? So these are 5 things that you can apply once you find 5 questions you can ask yourself once you've identified the constraints. So always ask yourself this question: what is the 10x question? What is it that we are trying to 10x? So at this point, let me just share with you our own company's experience. So for a long time, we struggled with cash flow, right? And it's really because of our business model. And because we are a training company, the constraint for every training business is that, how at any given point of time, you can only have one person in one room with a bunch of people, right? The four walls, geography, number of trainers, and the size of the room, these are all constraints. So we ask ourselves and say, okay, we can either choose two things. One is we can go one way to say this is a constraint for every training company in the world, every consultancy in the world, so it's not a problem for us, and live with it, right? But we don't like that approach, because if you live with this, you will die with the rest, right? You don't want to die with the rest. You want them to die without you, right? While you thrive. So we took the other road and said, can we break this constraint? So now the answer may sound obvious, right? If nowadays with digital learning platforms, it sounds so easy. But it took like 2 years for us to reorientate our thinking, our business operations, the products itself, the marketing itself, and the actual selling itself, and the service, and put together a totally new business model. But that enabled us to break the constraint, and that was how we increased our profits by 300% and our cash flow by 10 times. So what I'm saying is this: to find that 10x question might be easy, but you need to systematically work on it. Remember, this is not something that you have a eureka moment and tomorrow your business has got a 10x strategy. No, this is a long-term plan which you got to be committed to it, and then when you seriously work on it, you will see how your whole business will start to change. So I challenge you, ask yourself, what is your 10x question? What is that one thing you want to 10 times, whether 10 times more or 10 times less, that will give you an edge over everybody and make your competitors irrelevant? So this is the 10x strategy, which I'm very happy to share with you. And if you want to know more about how to go deep and find this, the beginning step I recommend is for you to contact us and download this exercise. This is a 2-page exercise, takes you hours to do it, and after that you've got to continue to work on it to test the hypothesis that you have, and then to work on the strategy. To actually really do this, you need about 2 years, like what we did. Okay, but this is a good start, and if you want this exercise, get in touch with us so that we can send this to you, and you can contact us at this email address. Oh, it's not here, but the email address, listen carefully: grow@growthcatalyst.com. .sg. grow@growthcatalyst.com.sg. And once you reach out to us, we will be very happy to send you this tool, and we have other resources like other videos that you can watch, or you can get in touch with us to see how we can help you to implement a 10x strategy. So thank you very much for listening in. I'm glad you spent this time, and I believe that it's going to be worthwhile for you, because this is really a worthwhile question to follow. So thank you very much. I hope to see you for other videos. Get in touch with us if you want this tool. Get in touch with us if you want other video resources. And we also have a diagnostic tool for you, for business owners, to test how ready are you to scale your business. So get in touch with us, and we love to be able to help you answer this question: how to scale your business and how to 10x your business. Thank you, and see you again.